I'm afraid international sanctions really don't work, and we have to recognise that fact, even as the US is adding new sanctions to Russia. The problem is the limited international cooperation, the way that different countries get round sanctions. So, for example, the 300 the 300 businesses, 300 people sanctioned on the 13th of June by the US. The sanctions won't take effect until August. They involve entities in China, in Turkey, in South Africa, as well as in Russia, because of these people, because of these countries resisting imposing or strictly enforcing sanctions, undermining the effectiveness of the sanctions regime. They have limited impact on their target. So some sanctions are narrowly targeted and fail to sufficiently impact the decision-making calculus of the target country. So for example, Russia, one of the claims in Russia is that sanctions don't hurt them. They can't hurt the economy and the ordinary people. Well, they do hurt the economy and the ordinary people, but the propaganda is saying, well, you can't buy this from Europe, but we make a better version here. Not necessarily true. The same sort of nonsense came out in Cuba. The same sort of nonsense comes out in Iran. And this is about the economic resilience and the adaptability. Target countries are often able to, the longer sanctions go on, they're able to adapt to sanctions through alternative trading partners, black markets, internal economic adjustments, and this resilience can mitigate the intended economic pressure and can actually add to a revitalizing of the internal market, and that, frankly, is part of the unintended consequences of sanctions. So on the one hand, the unintended consequences are positive. On the other hand, they're negative because they affect ordinary citizens far more than the targeted regime. It leads to resentment against the sanctioning countries, and it diminishes the international support over time. So the big countries which have been sanctioned, countries like Iran, despite extensive sanctions imposed by the international community, Iran has continued its nuclear program, albeit with economic hardships. The ordinary Iranians in the street detest the regime. The regime is partly kept in power because of its determination to resist the Western Satan, which has imposed all these sanctions. And we lose. The most important thing that we lose with the sanctions is the diplomatic access, the real diplomatic access, the opportunity to sit around a table and swill back tea and discuss ways forward. We lose that. We've lost that with Russia. We lost that with Iran. We've lost that with North Korea. Multiple rounds of sanctions imposed by the United Nations and individual countries to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Nothing has happened. It's actually produced nuclear weapons. It's persisted with its program, showing limited signs of compliance, limited impact of the sanctions regime. As for the 300 new sanctions companies now identified by America, that brings the total up to 4,500 sanctioned entities that will apparently limit Russia's ability to function, especially in high tech, with microchips, with components from the West, which are found in the missiles that they throw at Ukraine. The US decision to expand its sanctions against Russia is likely to increase pressure, in theory, on Russia in response to its actions or its policies against Ukraine, but it also damages the West, and Russia has now imposed its own sanctions on Western finance. And Putin said in his ultimatum that one of the preconditions for peace was a lifting of the sanctions. So clearly he feels the pressure of the sanctions, but it's not enough pressure to bring the war to a conclusion. It's not enough pressure to really have any sort of bite. It hurts us more than it hurts him, number one. And number two, it stops that conversation. Maybe it unites the West. Maybe it unites the West. The only thing I can think of that is positive, maybe it unites the people imposing the sanctions in some sense, that they're doing something positive and that Zelensky asked for this. You don't do something because somebody asks for it. Zelensky asked for help, and then he wanted to be specific about what the help was. That's not his call. Very happy to help Zelensky, but sanctions were the wrong help. Sanctions, I don't think sanctions work. I don't think sanctions are wise. I think sanctions stop conversations, and I think we would be much better talking to the Kremlin, talking to the Putin artifact, and trying to find a way forward to get Western countries and Russia back to conversation, because there's so much that we can learn, so much that we can benefit from by having a better relationship with Russia than the one we currently enjoy. I think sanctions of Russia, sanctions against Russia, sanctions against Iran are just absurd.